Today we're back for our last practice of close reading for informational text before your unit assessment. Remember, the unit assessment will be the final grade on the 9 weeks. It will be taking place on Wednesday of this week. So for the unit, or for this last practice with close reading of informational text, we're focusing on the following informational essential questions. How do readers know what to believe? What is informational text really about? And 5, how does interaction with text provoke thinking and response? As we close read, we are going to be close reading a section from this piece. And with this section, we are going to look at 3 phases during our close reading, just like always. When we read through the text, the first phase is to read for what the text says. The second phase is to read for how the text says it. And the third phase is to read for why the text matters. Within our first phase of reading, we're going to focus back in on the learning targets about central idea. Central idea is a key contributor in informational text. And so we're going to look at determining determine what 2 or more central ideas are in the text, and to analyze how that central idea develops over the course of the text with specific claims. Within this section, we are definitely looking at only one part. So although we're going to see all of the central ideas within a specific line of the text that we're going to be able to synthesize and understand, we are going to be only looking at one particular section, so we won't be able to get into any clear claims except for one possible claim for that section. Remember that central idea is to really figure out what is the text mainly about. What are the 2 or more big things, big ideas that the text talks about, that ties into the entire text of the piece. As we look at the central ideas, remember that they get narrowed, and you start with these big ideas, and these big ideas are organized by an author using specific claims. So the author will take these 2 or 3 big ideas, and then they will condense it down and organize it in the body paragraphs of their essay by individual claims. All of the claims will, remember, tie into that clear central idea. And today, for that specific close reading, we are going to be looking at what are the big central idea moments of this text. We will be looking at specific claims tomorrow, but today we're looking at the big central idea that the text is about. Tomorrow we'll be looking at one particular claim that ties into the major central ideas. So today and tomorrow are very much interconnected. So you're going to read over looking for where you sort of have to infer and put into your own words what the central ideas of the piece are that the author plans on, and in fact does, go through the entire piece and talk about. For phase 2, we are going to focus on how the text says it. Within this phase of the reading, we're going to focus on multiple learning targets. We're going to first look at determining the author's purpose. The why the author wrote it is part about how the author sets it up. So the author's goals or intentions for writing the text definitely contribute to the how they write it. So we're going to determine the author's purpose for the text. Remember, the author's purpose is going to be either to explain, to compare, to describe, to promote, to inform. We don't list entertain in this section simply because obviously this is the informational packet. So in the informational writing pieces, they might be entertaining, but their purpose is never to, in fact, entertain. The other thing we're going to look at in this second phase of reading, which is actually connected to multiple questions, is a new target. We have not been formatively assessed on this target yet, but that's okay. I know you'll be getting some questions next 9 weeks in our formative assessments, and I wanted to introduce you to it at this time. This target is to analyze the impact a specific word choice has on meaning. That means to look closely at the impact or effect specific words used by the author have on meaning, which is the purpose, the author's purpose of the text. So author's purpose and word choice are interconnected, and that's what you see in this particular target. A lot of times you'll see this question asked as, what is the purpose of word choice used in the piece? And it's going to always be to answer the following. Is the purpose to introduce something, to emphasize something, to create, to describe, to suggest, or to convey? Convey is a fancy word. We're going to use it a lot this year. That means to communicate. So we're going to talk and practice this one a little bit today. We're also going to connect it and practice in the second phase to analyzing the impact that word choice has on tone. This is sort of a subtopic of the learning target right above it. We've talked about this before. You have been formatively assessed on this one. That means to look closely at the impact or effect specific words used by the author have on the feeling, attitude, or tone of the text. Remember, we talked about tone, meaning it's describing the writing. It's the author's attitude in the text. And tone can be a positive word, a negative word, or a neutral word. So think about the tone of the piece. I would definitely recommend to look up and Google possible tone words. And tone words will always be categorized positive, negative, or neutral. And pick a word off that list when you think about what is the tone of a piece as you're using a fancy adjective to describe that tone. Oftentimes this question will be asked, what impact does the word choice in the sentence have on tone? You will want to begin to start answering that response by saying it or the tone creates a particular positive emotional attitude coming off the page, a particular negative emotional attitude coming off the page, or a neutral, objective, one of those word attitudes coming off the page. So you could start it with it creates this type of tone, it suggests this type of tone. You also want to go on to explain how you see it using some of those words within the passage that show that attitude, that tone coming off the page. And that's what we're going to be talking about in our second phase. Second phase consists of 3 separate questions. So beware, it's one reading of the text, but we're reading to answer 3 specific questions. So the first time we're going to be reading to answer the question, what's the author's purpose in the text after looking at our word choice and labeling some words as tone. The second question for phase 2 you're going to answer is what's the impact the specific words we highlighted when we reread that text that they actually have on this passage, and is the tone positive, negative, or neutral, and what's the specific adjective you'd use to describe that tone. And then you'd want to begin with one of the ones I've just talked about when we went over that learning target. And then the last section is what's the impact specific words have on the meaning or purpose of the text. Remember, this is that new one. So the word choice is used to introduce what? The word choice is used to emphasize something. The word choice might be used to create something. So tell me what you think the point is of using that tone that connects back to our purpose. So these 3 are all 3 for phase 2. So one reading, which would be your second reading, and you're answering 3 different questions for that second reading of the text, all focused on word choice, author's purpose, and tone. The final reading of the text is connected to our interactions between the texts. We talked about interactions in literature. We're now going to go switch gears and talk about the interactions between individuals, events, and ideas in the text in informative writing. Remember, we said that means to look closely at the relationship or connections between individuals, events, and ideas in the text, such as how does an individual influence society, or how does an event influence a particular person. In this case, we're going to focus on how an individual mentioned in the close reading influenced our society today. So for that one, when you read it that third and final time, I want you to focus on why that text matters. Highlight why the author might have thought it was important to include this particular person they mentioned in this section of the text. Why did they include her? What about her shows an impact on our lives? So highlight a statement from that section that you think shows a clear impact on our lives. After you discuss what you've highlighted, I want you to explain how Harriet Quimby influenced society. So answer that question. How did Harriet Quimby influence society based on the section that we're given? Please make sure you do, in fact, provide text evidence for this piece. So we are going to have a new target for this final one. It's the only one you need it, but make sure that you are citing text evidence to support the claim you're making that answers that question for how Harriet Quimby influenced our society. So again, make sure you quote your text evidence as you answer that question in phase 3, where you're talking about why the text matters, and in this case, how a specific person mentioned does in fact impact our society. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this passage and this close reading. We will definitely go over and discuss it at the end. So go ahead and get working.